Evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to episode, I believe, 12 of On the Ball. Where if there's a ball, we're probably going to talk about it. We've got a great episode for you tonight. We are on the 10th of December, so 15 days from Christmas. And better yet, 21 days until the last day of this year. And hopefully 2021 is even better than 2020 was supposed to be. For those of you that have watched and been a part of the previous episodes, thank you. We appreciate it. We enjoy the conversations that we've had on these episodes prior and are looking forward to the future. Again, we are still talking about what that future looks like and making sure that we're not just talking about the NFL, but really giving you guys a broad, not 3-hour long episode that can really engage with you guys and kind of give you some insights potentially where you may not get them. So with that being said, I'll pass it over to Zach, and then tonight's show is just kind of, again, talking through last week's NFL games, and there was a lot of good stuff in those NFL games that we have to talk about. So looking forward to that, but before we do that, I'm going to pass it over to Zach, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Zach?
Yeah, and I think you said episode 12. I think we're on lucky number 13, actually. So
Is it 13? I could be
I
wrong.
think so.
Let me look.
Unless we've done some mislabeling, I think we're on episode 13.
Is that what YouTube
so
tells
we're
us?
over. Yeah, check
Yep,
YouTube.
Yep. We're episode 13. Okay,
Been,
we'll update that.
Doing this for
13
quarter
weeks
of this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of crazy to think about, but it's crazy to think about the NFL season. Basically, I mean, it's about a month left, so
yeah, 5 weeks I think was
feels like
the number.
we were just doing predictions and just talking about how they were going to have an NFL season this year, which we've touched on, but it's been relatively smooth, but yeah, we've got a lot of good stuff to review from week 13 in the NFL for episode 13. So I came up with some stuff. What do you have?
So I want to start with the first thing I want to start with is I believe so far there's only one team in the NFL that has secured a playoff spot, and that is the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, I was gonna say the Saints.
Okay. And my main reason for saying that is, you're still looking without Drew Brees. You're looking at, Taysom Hill is still leading this team. He had a relatively good game last week. 27 of 37 for 232 yards with 2 TDs, no interceptions. Had 14 carries for 83 yards. Begs kind of the question for me. Obviously, I'm not going to sit here and say he's Patrick Mahomes because he's not. But, I mean, these numbers he's putting up, they're really good. And they beg the question at the end of this year, is this someone the Saints potentially move to moving forward? Because if you look at his stats, I mean, he's only gotten better I believe he's gotten better every week he's played. Let me see here. Can I see that by chance? Is there week by week? No, there's not there is a log. Okay. So his first week he was against Atlanta, 233 yards. Then he had 78 yards against the Broncos, which they were just running the ball down their throat, and defense, they had great field position all game. Mm-hmm. And then they played the Falcons again for 232. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what he does this week against, I believe, better competition. They play the Eagles this weekend, so not really better competition. And from my understanding of it is Drew Brees should be back probably for the Chiefs game. I think that's where he'll be back. And they're even predicting he'll be back week 15. So we may not get to see Taysom Hill actually, play those games. But I think there are some questions down in New Orleans that, Drew Brees is still playing fairly well. You and I have talked about it some. Mm-hmm. But is Taysom Hill? I think they're really getting that answer is Taysom Hill that future at the quarterback position for them moving forward.
Right. And I actually just saw something today on that. As I pull something up here. I just saw something about that today, that the Saints kind of internally were, with Taysom Hill and his recent play, we're kind of getting the sense that he is the eventual replacement for Drew Brees. I don't know how many years or year that is down the road. But it's a little, I mean, as well as he's been playing, it's a little odd because, I mean, Taysom Hill is 30 years old. And I don't know if you want to assign a percentage to his value, but I would say at least 50% of his value is from being able to run the ball 14 times for almost
Mm-hmm.
100 yards like he did last week. So is a 30, let's say maybe he
2 more
takes over in a
years.
year or two. Yeah. Is a 32-year-old, I'll say, run first quarterback. Um, is he the future of your franchise? Maybe for a couple years, but is he the future for 10 years? It's kind of a weird. I don't know if we've ever seen like a transition like this before, with kind of an older quarterback. We've seen it a lot with younger quarterbacks coming in. Peyton
Mm-hmm.
Manning, um, even Tom Brady had some backups that didn't take over, but had some backups. Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, um, things like that. But not only is it an older quarterback, but also a running quarterback. Um, so
Yeah.
it's an interesting situation
I
for
guess
sure.
that question though could be extended on to the likes of Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson, Kyler Murray, and even Lamar Jackson. I mean, you're talking about longevity with Taysom Hill. I mean, that at least that's what I'm getting from that questioning. I mean, he's 30,
Yeah.
take over at 32. I understand Mahomes and everybody else is younger than that, but
Well, I don't think they're even. I mean, Mahomes, Watson, the person that's maybe closest to Taysom Hill is Lamar Jackson. I don't think any of those guys, even Kyler Murray, are really close to the run, like dedicated running plays that are run
mhm,
for specifically the quarterback. I think a lot of those guys take the running chances when they see them, and they have a lot of times where they, like Russell Wilson, they can get down, they can slide, they can avoid hits, get out of bounds. Um, Taysom Hill, before Drew Brees got hurt, he was lining up in the backfield for wildcat plays, for designed runs, and he
yeah,
still is. So he is much more of that type of quarterback than a Patrick Mahomes, who maybe scrambles 3 to 6 times a game to pick up a first down here and there.
yeah.
So I think it's a little different in that sense. There was, I don't have the exact timeline here. I heard and I read something on Taysom Hill with his college career, and there were injuries, and he went to BYU, which I think he had some sort of uh, religious retreats or of some kind that basically pushed out his football career. So I don't think he necessarily started. Don't quote me on this, but I did read some about it, of him playing um, later into his 20s with football. So I don't think he really has 8 to 10 years of mileage on him at the moment, um, which is a fair point. But
Yeah, he went all
it's
the
a
way
unique
till
scenario.
2016. So he's
Pretty late.
30. He's 30. I graduated in 15. You graduated in 16. So he
Yeah,
graduated the same year you did, and he's 30 and you're 26.
yeah. So
So
he
he,
basically has
yeah,
4 years of mileage that he's saved,
yeah, pretty much.
um, for whatever reason
Yeah,
that had happened at BYU. But yeah, it's a unique. I don't think we've ever seen anything really like this.
yeah.
This sort of situation.
Well, that was kind of my first one. I think the Saints are playing incredibly well to, you know, I wish I could have said I didn't think this was going to happen, but at the same time, I was pretty certain the Saints were going to be that good team.
Yeah.
I just hard to bet
It,
against Drew Brees and Sean Payton,
it will be
arguably.
interesting to see when the playoffs do start up here. I mean, what do you think? Drew Brees is coming back. They were already running special plays for Taysom Hill, you know, 5, 10 times a game. How do you think that percentage starts to change? Do you think they have him in more? It's going to be an
Uh,
interesting offense to follow for the playoffs.
I think you're going to see a Saints offense that you've never seen before, and I think you're going to see a Sean Payton take that next step. I think Sean Payton's a great coach. There was some rumor that that the Colts were going to trade for him back when we lost our last coach after Chuck Pagano. There was some that we were going to make a trade, and we would have traded a first round pick for Sean Payton, which is crazy to think about people trading draft picks for a head coach. But
Yeah.
that was in talks because of how great of a job he's done with Drew Brees and Drew Brees' shoulder and the concerns that we were having with Andrew.
Hmm.
So I've just always really liked Sean Payton as a coach, as a human being. But I think you're going to see an offense that we could have potentially seen with the 49ers back when Colin Kaepernick and Alex Smith were on that team. And so I think you're going to see more play from Taysom Hill. He'll probably throw the ball more just because of the fact that you have that option. But I
Hmm.
could see him playing more of a Antoine Randall L kind of position, or a Julian Edelman type of position where he's catching the ball in the backfield and then dinking it out to a wide receiver or something like that. I think you're more likely to see something like that than Drew Brees and him lining up next to each other or
Yeah.
Drew Brees being taken off the field. I think Drew Brees will be taken off the field some, and that's just a protection aspect of him. But for him, I think you're going to see some new things from the Saints offense that we wouldn't have seen years prior because of
Hmm.
how well Taysom Hill is playing.
Yeah. I agree. I think they almost use this or are can kind of use this as like a trial run. Um, they were already using Taysom Hill on some special packages, and I think now playoffs come, they're going to have some college like plays where we might even see both those guys in at the same time. It's going to be there's going to be some fun plays coming out of that offense.
If
I'll
you're
say.
if you're in that coaching room in that quarterback room, if Sean Payton isn't coming up with plays right now that will go into the play that they're practicing starting when Drew Brees comes back,
Yeah.
and they don't pull him out in the playoffs, I'll be incredibly shocked. I think
Yeah.
there will be plays that we see from the Saints that we've never seen before from any team.
Yeah.
And it's going to catch whoever they're playing by surprise.
Definitely.
Is my opinion on that one. So it's kind of your
Yeah. I
first.
agree.
What's your kind of? I talked
Wait.
about a little bit about who I think you're going to go to potentially at some point. So it might have been a good segue for you, but I talked about Alex Smith a little bit.
Oh, you did? Yeah. 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 I actually I'm looking at my list here. I didn't have that one on there. Well, no, sorry. I did. I
I
did
would have been
in
shocked if you didn't.
in indirectly though.
Okay.
Less about Alex Smith and the
More
Washington
about the
football team
Steelers. Yeah, yeah,
and more about the Steelers.
yeah.
It's in your title here on the episode, but we touched last week on the Steelers quote unquote cakewalk schedule. Anyone that wants to see that, go check out last week's episode. We laid out the Steelers schedule week 1 through 11 up until last week. Um, and there weren't very many tough games on that schedule. You guys can pull it up yourselves and take a look. And then we talked about this past week, and they play the Washington football team and suffer their first loss of the season. So it's just kind of the Steelers are almost like the least talked about, but also maybe most overrated team. They were 11-0, and almost no one was talking about them. um, as an 11-0 team with a team that could have had an undefeated season, obviously, but also a team that's had a pretty easy schedule and then loses to a team in a division that we've been just really laughing about all year. Though they had a
Still
good
are
week this
laughing.
past week. Yeah, still are laughing, but yeah, I mean, are the Steelers overrated? That's the question.
Yeah, I mean, you got to give it. I kind of say I like what I'm seeing from Alex Smith. In 2020, I feel like we needed a feel good story, and if you need a feel good story, Alex Smith is it. That injury that he went through, he should not be playing football. He should have never been able to play football again. And here he is, throwing 31 of 46 for 296 yards and 1 TD. And I mean, just playing his mind out. Now, getting to the Steelers overrated aspect, I mean, they lost a big player in Bud Dupree. And they didn't have any run game. Now,
Yeah,
albeit their best runner, James Conner, wasn't playing. I don't know what his injury is or
I think it was COVID actually.
it was COVID. Okay, so
Yeah,
they hoped that Benny Snell could hold that. 2 weeks ago, Benny Snell had a really good game, and they were hoping that would come over to this game, and it just didn't. And I think it's twofold. They need a running game, and they need they need someone on defense to step it up, because if they don't get someone to step it up, then it's over. And the other thing on it is Juju Smith-Schuster, man, you were a bunch of talk, and you had 7 catches for 28 yards last week. That's
yeah.
pitiful. And this season, he's got 73 receptions for 600 yards and 6 TDs. That's just not very good. If you're the premier receiver for a team, that's not pretty good. That's not good at all. And
Yeah,
that's kind of mine.
I did see one stat. Talking about the receiver, obviously someone's throwing him the ball. Big Ben leads. Well, I guess I should frame this differently. He has the lowest yards per. It was either catch or attempt, whatever the
It's
so it'd probably be
attempt.
attempt, right,
It's an
for a quarterback.
attempt. Yeah.
Yeah, yards per attempt uh, of any quarterback in the league. I think it was about like
It's
six and a half yards.
6.4. It's 6.4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and that's the lowest in the league. So I don't. I mean, I haven't watched the Steelers enough to know if that's more a function of their offensive play calling with a lot of more kind of dink and dunk passes. But when I think back to the Steelers, they've had a lot of really good, really successful receivers there, and a lot of throwing downfield with Big Ben. Think back to Antonio Brown, um, even Heinz Ward days. There was a lot of downfield play for the Steelers, and Big Ben almost just kind of seems like this team is kind of, they have skill on offense. They have a slightly above average kind of game manager quarterback and an aging Big Ben, and an elite defense who just lost probably their best player on defense a couple weeks ago. So just that stat popped out to me. I don't know, if you have anything to add to that as far as putting eyes on games that they played, but I don't know. Is that offense explosive enough to potentially win a shootout if their defense can't hold someone to 17 points?
Well, I mean, with a run game, maybe. With a strong run game with James Conner back, maybe they can. Big Ben had more yards and I believe had more yards and more TDs than Alex Smith did. So, I mean,
Alex Smith's never been known to
he's never been known to light up the board. If they play Patrick Mahomes, they gonna win that game without a strong defense? Probably not.
That's kind of what I'm getting at. Is can Big Ben keep up with the Chiefs?
Do I think they're going to the Super Bowl? No, I don't. I just I think it's incredibly hard. But here's some names above him on the list of pass per yard or yards per attempt: Dwayne Haskins, Mitchell Trubisky, Daniel Jones, Joe Flacco, PJ Walker, who plays for Carolina, freaking
Oh yeah, yeah. He had a game.
Tyrod Taylor has more yards than him, yards per attempt. Same with
Yeah.
Jameson Winston. Jeff Driscoll has more. Kyle Allen, Logan Woodside, he's only got 7 attempts, or 1 attempt, but it was for 7 yards. He still has more than him. Chase Daniels, Brett Ripine or Peen or however you say that on the Broncos has a more yards per attempt. I mean, the thing on it is, that's what's crazy to me is Big Ben is just not. He's not there. He isn't there, and I don't know what the Steelers have to do to get that, and maybe Big Ben is was having shoulder pain, and so maybe that's part of it. Maybe that's how they're managing him.
He is dealing with some a couple. Is it both knees or at least one knee?
It's one knee was swollen. I think it was his right knee was swollen.
So you just wonder what that yards per attempt is a result of. It'd be interesting to take a closer look at their actual play calling and just see if it's a lot of short routes, or if it's a lot of just good protection and then just dumping off 5 yards downfield. So, yeah, you just wonder if that offense is explosive enough to, beat the Chiefs, beat who else is in the AFC there?
Titans, really.
Titans, yeah.
Browns, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Kind of have to say them, I guess.
Yeah. That's the big question, though.
Yeah.
That they're gonna have to ask themselves.
Yeah, I agree completely. I agree
Even
completely.
the Bills, I'd put the Bills up there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Kind of moving on, and guys, if anybody in the chat has any questions, don't forget, drop them in. We'd love to answer those and try our best to answer those for you. Another big one for me is was it I think it was the Bears game. Weren't the Bears ahead and they lost from behind? Let me look.
They've had quite a disastrous month and a half.
The Bears went into the half 23-13. Ended up losing that game 34-30. And it just, one, it's interesting to me to watch how teams play differently under a new head coach. They fire their GM, they fire their head coach, and now they put Matthew Stafford as 27 of 42 for 402 yards, 3 TDs, and 1 interception.
Yeah.
He hasn't had a game that good all year. And, coach gets fired and now he's having that good of a year. It's interesting to me when that kind of stuff takes place. And we talked about this last week, kind of who takes over in that and that Lions head coaching room. And we also talked about the fact of, what do you do with Matthew Stafford? Are we blowing this up? Are we moving forward? Because obviously he can still play really well. 402 yards, 9.6 average per attempt. I mean, you're talking big numbers there. 109 QBR. Where are the Lions going to go with this? And then on top of that, when are we going to see the Bears fire their coach and probably their GM?
Yeah.
Any predictions on when you think that's going to happen? You think they live out this season or what?
Yeah, I think they finish out the season. It's been a I want to say the Bears were 5-2, I think, and we were talking. I
They're
know you
still on
weren't
the
too high on the
bubble.
Bears. They're still on the bubble. You weren't too high on the Bears, but I thought they could have been one of those teams, like a good regular season team with just the high floor of having a really good defense and kind of a manageable offense that they end up as one of those bubble teams, which they still are, and kind of get into the playoffs. But I think they've lost 5 games in a row.
They have.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
They have.
Yeah, but if it keeps trending this way and they miss the playoffs, they're going to have to, I think, just take a look and try and get a clean slate. I mean, you need a new quarterback there, potentially new head coach,
Sorry.
new GM.
Sixth straight loss. Sixth straight loss.
Okay. Yeah. So that's a rough month and a half over in
Yeah.
Chicago. After thinking they were 5-1 then.
Yeah.
That means so that they were,
and they had beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah.
And a couple other
Yeah,
teams.
I don't know what's changed. I don't know. I really don't. I haven't seen enough of them in the last 6 weeks to know what has been different. I know they were missing David Montgomery for about 2 or 3 weeks of that with the concussion, I believe it was. He's a huge part of their run game. They obviously lost Tariq Cohen early this year, who's a big pass catcher out of their backfield. But they still have some weapons on that offense, and their defense is great. It's just the quarterback, and they're going to have to take a look. I think they finished out this year, and I think they're going to have to take a look this offseason what they want to do.
Yeah. I don't know. That was a big one for me. We've talked a lot about games being thrown, and I think there's one more we'll probably talk about this week. If you don't bring it up, I'm sure I will. But yeah, it's upsetting for Bears fans. I mean, you think you have this game wrapped up, and then second half your defense doesn't come out, and they can't stop anybody. So,
yeah,
it's unfortunate. All right, what do you got?
Well, I had one that we touched on last week with Cleveland Browns. We were questioning last week. Are they for real? They were 8-3 last week. I think you brought up their schedule and kind of questioned some of their wins, some of their losses, and I think we both kind of agreed, like, let's take a look in about a month. And they had a couple tough matchups within, obviously the Titans this week. They have a few more coming up that'll be some tests for them. But they pull out, gosh, what were they? They were out to like a 41 or like 30 something to 7 lead.
Yeah, there's only been 3 games this year that have gone that way. It's a 38-7 lead.
38-7, yeah.
Yeah,
Which,
that's happened 3 other times in the season. One happened with the Patriots, I believe. Who was it? It was the Patriots. It was the Patriots, and then it was before that. It was the Titans playing the Colts the week before.
yeah. But I mean, the Browns. This game turned out a lot closer than 38-7 would indicate. But knocking off the Titans, a tough team. The Browns are kind of building this consistency that we talked about, even week 2, week 3 of this season, that we were waiting for. We wanted to see it before we kind of said the Browns were a contender, a playoff contender. But they're building this consistency with the running game. Baker Mayfield had a great game this week. He hasn't had a great season, but he's shown flashes, and that's, I think, just enough with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, 2 excellent running backs, and then I think, like you mentioned last week, good defense. So I think the Browns are a team. I wouldn't want to play them in the playoffs. it feels like a team you just don't know what you're going to get, but it's almost in a bad way. Like you feel like you're going to get the good Browns instead of the bad Browns,
Yeah.
with the way things are trending, at least right now.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that's um for some reason your video quality is going all over the place. I think it's probably Discord. We may have to switch over to like Zoom next week. Um,
I see.
but
Yeah.
um, but Baker Mayfield, I mean, yeah, I mean, hard to say he didn't have a great game. 25 of 33 for 334 yards and 4 TDs. I think it's important to note that Donovan Peoples-Jones had 2 receptions for 92 yards and 1 TD. So, can you rely on Donovan Peoples-Jones to play that kind of way every week? Not sure. But what I will say is, again, we see this here. You stop Derrick Henry, you stop the Titans.
Yep.
And if you're a fan of Tennessee, you should be really worried about what will happen if Derrick Henry gets hurt or injured, or hurt and injured are the same thing. But for some reason he can't get the run game off the ground. If you're a Titans fan, you gotta be worried. And you know what? Going into the playoffs, what are the 2 things that we know you need going into the playoffs? Good defense and a run game. It's what you need to be successful. And I'll tell you what, it's hard to bet against Derrick Henry, but 15 carries for 60 yards, that ain't very good.
Yeah. This almost feels like a situation where Derrick Henry was relatively unknown, like about 2 years ago, right before their big playoff run. I think their big playoff run really brought him into the spotlight, I would say.
Well, that's because they had what was his name from Dallas, and then he went to the Eagles, and then he went
DeMarco Murray.
to Marco
Yeah.
Murray. That's why.
Yeah, but what I'm getting at is I think it's one of those things where I think teams are starting to game plan more for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they had almost the element of surprise with Derrick Henry before he was truly known as kind of this big bruising workhorse running back. Um, Teams I don't think were fully committed to him, and then as weeks and weeks went on, where he was just running the ball all over everyone, I think teams are starting to say, "Okay, this guy's legit. Let's try and stop him and make someone else beat us," aka, you know, Miami Dolphins Ryan Tannehill. Um, so I think there's just been some game planning going on against the Titans. They're still a great team. I mean, Tannehill has been pretty solid, more than a game manager, pretty solid. But I think you put the ball in his hands versus having Derrick Henry go for 200 yards on you, and you give yourself a better chance to beat the Titans. I think
Yeah.
that's what we're saying.
Yeah, I that is what we're saying. And I mean, the good news, I also worry about Derrick Henry's carry totals. He, in his 5 seasons, this is his 5th season in the NFL, he's got over 1,000 carries. And so those first 2 seasons, he only had 110 and 176, but 215, 303, 271. So they're riding him hard as far as a running back goes. So Tennessee's got to get themselves together, and I think within the next 2 to 3 years they have to make that push and that run if they want that Super Bowl. They're gonna have to do it here quick, because I don't know about Henry's reliability there in a couple years. But back to that game. Browns defense almost let them down. Browns have got to be better on defense, and they've got to play a whole game. They can't just say, "Oh well, we'll play the first half," because against Kansas City, you can't just play the first half. You're gonna have to play a whole half of football, a whole game of football. Same against the likes of the Rams, the Saints, the Seahawks. You've got to play a whole 60 minutes. You can't just say, "Oh, well, we'll play for the first 30 and then we'll just kind of cruise at the." Nah, it's not going to work that way. They won't be successful in the playoffs if they do that. So.
Yep.
But I
Yeah.
will say, I am still a little concerned that Cleveland is going to make the playoffs and they're going to pull a Houston Texans and lose in the first round by a lot. Just kind of a feeling I have there.
Yeah, it's with their inconsistencies, it's certainly possible. It's just gonna be what side of the bed they woke up on that day, as a
Yeah.
team. So
Yeah. Yeah.
what else you got?
Moving on, a game that kind of caught me by surprise, and it's I don't know if we should be worried or if we should just chalk it up to they're almost already in the playoffs and it doesn't really matter. But Kansas City Chiefs and Broncos. This is 2 weeks in a row now that the Kansas City Chiefs have been close to losing the game. I mean, albeit they scored a field goal in the fourth and the Broncos didn't score anything, but they allowed Melvin Gordon to get 131 yards rushing, which is 8.7 per carry. They also Drew Lock didn't have a great game. He threw for 151 yards, 2 TDs and 2 interceptions with a competent quarterback. Broncos are in a position to win this game.
Yeah.
And so for me, if you're a Chiefs fan, I don't think you are worried, but are you getting a little worried? Because this is 2 weeks in a row now that there may be a chink in the armor here, and the Chiefs have got to go and play. Who is it? Chiefs. Who'd they play this week? They've got to go and play the the Dolphins this week in Miami, and then they've got to go play the Saints. 2 teams which, by the way, are fairly hot right now. Dolphins are in a really good position. So are the Saints. As a Chiefs fan, you're trying to lock up that first overall spot. Are you would you be worried as a Chief fan, or would you just say, no big deal. It was close, but we still won the game. Do you want to see your team blowing out these teams at this point if you're a Chiefs fan?
Yeah. That's a good question. I don't know if we really have an answer to this one. Just I feel like it's more of an internal sense of urgency within that locker room for that team. Is where you would have to go to get the heartbeat of the team and sense of basically why there might have been a letdown. I know they still won the game, but it wasn't a blowout. I think you see it a lot. Having played sports too myself, you see it a lot. Kind of play down to your competition. You just don't get when you're a team like the Chiefs, and that it's kind of Super Bowl or bust. You're coming off a Super Bowl win. You're looking toward the playoffs. You're 11-1. You're gonna make the playoffs.
They also are the second team that's clinched a playoff spot.
They've clinched. It's almost one of those things like you kind of start to look a little too far ahead, and you don't quite get that same adrenaline rush. You're just playing the Broncos. It's not the Steelers or something. It's not a playoff game. So just something as small as that. Not saying that they weren't up for this game, but I think there's an extra level that teams like the Chiefs can get into. You see it sometimes in like the NBA with
LeBron,
the Golden State Warriors, especially LeBron. Playoff LeBron. And I think the Chiefs just know what their goal is this season, and playing the Broncos in Week 12 just it wasn't. I get the sense that it just wasn't that exciting for them, and they still won.
Okay, so I guess my next follow-up question on that is, okay, that's great and all. You're looking forward to the, playoffs. When did the Patriots ever do that?
Yeah, it's a different. Man, the Patriots are a different beast. Bill Belichick's like, I mean, that team's Belichick's a robot, and then that team turns into a robot, and they just function the same every week, right?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. But, we're talking about the Chiefs wanting to be that dynasty. I mean, they gave Patrick Mahomes a 10-year contract for $500 million,
yeah,
which is insane to me. But, you know, what you can't name, excuse me, a Patriots team that did that kind of took a week off in a sense, and
yeah.
played down to that competition.
It might have looked differently too. Um, we'd have to go back and look at some of those Patriot games from the mid 2010s, past 10 years or so.
Hmm.
I'm sure there's some losses in there, some disappointing losses
Yeah.
to lesser teams. I think it just looks and comes across differently when you get a Bill Belichick post game presser versus Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, kind of Tyreek Hill, flashy, um, flashy players. Travis Kelsey, for that matter, flashy player. I think it also just perception of said loss or minimal win would come across differently. So I think every team, it's just kind of human nature almost to have these sort of letdowns and sometimes playing down to your competition. Not to spoil a future point here, but the Seahawks surely did that this week. And I actually just read something. I'm on ESPN here, and it disappeared. But there was a comment from, is it Shaquem or Shaquille? I get them mixed up. Griffin,
Whichever.
one of the
Does he have a
Griffins.
hand or not have a hand? That's how I'd be able to tell them apart.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't
But
envy
one of
Pete.
one of the Griffins said that they came into the game underestimating the Giants, which just kind of speak. I mean,
That's
you're
just
coming against
ridiculous to me.
it just happens though. It's human nature.
Yeah, but we're talking about people, and we can transition over to that one. But
Mhm.
we're talking about people. I hate that. I hate that. If a Colts player said that and I was the GM or the coach, they'd be in my office that next day saying, "What are you talking about? You these guys are professionals. These guys on the Giants, are they Tyreek Hill? Are they, Patrick Mahomes? Are they the great player Mike Evans? No, they're not. They're not
Yeah.
even Saquon Barkley. But to sit here and say, oh, well, we underestimated them. What are you talking about? You underestimated them. They're NFL players. That's just
Yeah,
dumb to me.
well, I get that point, but they're NFL players, but they're all also human. Um, these are players that go home and have families and have other things on their mind as well.
I,
Um,
I
and
get it.
and when it's a week when you finish your game on Sunday and you come in, start looking at film, and you're all right. I got the Broncos this week. You just have this little like mental relaxation. And it's not to say that they don't care or that they're not going to try because it's just a guaranteed win. It's just this almost like subconscious feeling that happens a lot of the time, that can happen, um, to humans, really. And I think it's not to say that it happens every single time, especially when it's a team that needs every single win. I think it's just exacerbated by the Chiefs. Everyone talks about a Super Bowl hangover. The Chiefs aren't really having that, but it could have been a Super Bowl hangover week this week where,
Yeah.
they're 10-1, looking toward the playoffs, already locked up a playoff spot. They're playing Drew Lock and the Broncos.
I, I just,
It's it's just one of those things. I know it's their job. They're professional athletes. It's what they're paid millions of dollars to do. But I think it happens to everyone. I think everyone comes in. Sometimes you go
Yeah.
into work. Sometimes you go into work and you're like, hey, I don't have that much going on today. I'm gonna take it easy, or Friday's July 4th. Let's take it a little easy this week. We got the holiday on Friday, and
I'd be
yeah, I think it happens to everyone in some sort of capacity.
So I've got two more points on this one. I would be interested to see what Seahawks practice looked like last week. And if Pete Carroll was keeping them accountable. Um I'm curious if practice was kind of lackadaisical because they knew the Giants were going to come in. And then two, I think the reason the Giants won is the simple fact that someone we know rode back on a plane with the vice president of football operations and said, "Good luck, you're going to need it." I mean,
That's
just
probably it.
some karma. Like, I never say as a Colts fan or as an IU fan, like I never say, you know, good luck or anything like that. Like, we'll see how the game goes. Like, because karma is fickle, and it will come back and it will bite you, and it absolutely will bite you.
Yeah.
And so it kind of it kind of makes me laugh.
Yeah, and speaking about the Seahawks, obviously a letdown to, backup quarterback on a arguably bad team already. Definitely just a game that they played down to their competition. Like one of their own players said, they underestimated them. Um, you think back to like the Bill Belichick teams and all the post game pressers, and whether they're playing the Pittsburgh Steelers at 11-1, or the I don't know what teams, the Bills, right? The Patriots always beat up on the Bills.
Mm-hmm.
It was always just next week for Bill Belichick. Who do we play next week? We're preparing the same. We do what we do. I think uh, that sort of atmosphere created what kind of bred so much success and consistency with the Patriots for all those years. And I don't think that happens with every other team. There are a lot of teams that the Seahawks are notorious for this, as we saw this week. Pete Carroll's a very enthusiastic coach. They get up real high for big games, big primetime games. They always seem to think back to those 49er matchups. Richard Sherman getting up for those big primetime games, and then they play the Giants and lose to a backup quarterback without. I don't think they scored an offensive. I think they scored one offensive touchdown. I think also had one touchdown pass, but some teams are like that, and sometimes it pays off. You just got to get to the playoffs, and then it's the playoffs, and now you're excited, and you get up, and you get that extra adrenaline, and you're good to go. So
Yeah. I don't know. I kind of want the Giants to make the playoffs, and I kind of want them to make a run. It's just so typical Giants fashion.
wide open for them.
It is, but
Yeah.
they would play. Let's see, they'd be the 4 seed. So the 2 seed Packers would play the Vikings. They'd play the Seahawks in New York right now, as it
Hey,
stands.
maybe the Seahawks are playing the long game. Maybe Pete Carroll sat down, looked at the schedule, looked at the Giants' schedule, was like, "Hey, if we lose to them, they win out. We, go 2-2 the rest of the way. We'll play the Giants in."
So okay,
No,
so that leads us to the next question, and probably the last one on my list: the New York Jets. Talking about
yeah,
losing.
it's a good one because it's actually the last one on my list was
Okay.
the Raiders.
Okay. Well, perfect.
Yep.
Um, Are they losing for Trevor Lawrence? Because, and I watched a lot of ESPN this past Monday, and a lot of people, including Ryan Clark and Dan Orlovsky, who, some guys don't give those crazy takes, right? But both of those
Yeah.
guys know Greg Williams well, and they said basically, this is who Greg Williams is, just plain and simple. This is who Greg.
Yeah.
Um,
Always been aggressive.
he's been that way from the day he started. So that's where it is. So you're not going to get any different from him, but you haven't won a football game the whole year. You're about to win the football game, and literally 2 plays in a row the Raiders could have had a touchdown. They got the second time, but it's just like,
as Ted would call it, they called an engage 8.
yeah.
With 1 play left in the game and the lead, and well, they ended up losing. So
Yeah.
what was
So
that, a 46-yard touchdown pass?
I think it was.
Like?
Yeah, I think it was. So, it's just interesting to me. It's one of those things where you look at it and you say, really?
Yeah, I don't want to be too much of a conspiracy theorist here and say, oh, they had the lead and they wanted to keep the Trevor Lawrence hopes alive, but
They were wanting to keep
like
the Trevor Lawrence hopes alive.
I think subconsciously they were. But like you mentioned, Greg Williams, I mean, he's done that. He's been an aggressive defensive play caller his whole career. Gosh, it's just such a questionable time to bring a blitz like that when they're at the 46-yard line, basically midfield, with, I want to say, like 15 seconds left, basically the last play of the game, and you leave your corner out on an island, one-on-one, when you could have just called. Let's see, they were up 7, so they were up by 4. So they were safe from a field goal time in the game. So you just call it a 2 deep safety. You drop everyone off. You let them get 15 yards.
No, you don't even drop a 2. You don't even drop a 2-yard a 2 safety. You drop 4.
Yeah. You drop 3 or 4. You bring in your tight end to go play center field, and then you let them get 10 to 15 yards, and you tackle them at the 30, and the game's over. So I don't know. It's just such a weird play call. I'm sure there was a lot of fun stuff on ESPN theorizing, why the Raiders and how the Raiders were able to do that. But on the other side, my question, my concern, with how much we've talked about the Raiders, I think maybe me more than you, kind of being an exciting upcoming team, is they got blown out by the Falcons last week. They've beaten the Chiefs. They almost beat the Chiefs again. They get blown up by the Falcons, like I mentioned, and then they pretty much lose to the Jets, barring a Hail Mary, essentially. And so, what Raiders team? This isn't quite the time of the season to be having the inconsistencies like this. What Raiders team are we going to get heading into? Probably they're going to make the playoffs. So what team are we going to get here?
Well, hold up. They may not make the playoffs. Don't even start with that.
They may not, but
depends on if they win this weekend.
Yeah.
I think the Raiders team that you're going to get is the one that plays the Colts this weekend. This is as important of a game as they're ever going to get right here.
Yeah.
Because they win, they're in the playoffs. They lose, they're out. In my opinion, they're 2 games back from being in the playoffs. Their schedule is the Chargers, the Dolphins, the Broncos after the Colts. So
Yeah.
easily two winnable games there in the Chargers and the Broncos. But which Chargers team are we going to get? And, the Dolphins are playing well. They're fighting for seeding in the playoffs. And they're fighting for a playoff spot because they're sixth right now. I mean, if you look at it, six, 7, 8, 9, and 10, 6, 7, 8, and 9 are all are all 8-4 or 7-5. And
3 through 9 are separated by 2 games.
Yeah. And I mean, and the Titans are 8-4. So, this is an important game for the Colts. This is an important game for the Raiders. The Colts win this game and the Titans lose to the Jaguars. It's possible. Jaguars have a relatively decent defense. It's not great, but, it's possible.
Right.
How the Raiders play this weekend are the way that you need to see them play. They need to blow out the Colts, or they need to have a really good win against the Colts, or they can just basically kiss their season goodbye because it's over. They're 2 games back. They may win. They could win out, but will they be in the playoffs? Probably not. They take a step back if they don't win against the Colts, and they have to really show what kind of team they want to be when they play the Colts this weekend, because this is make it or break it. Every game counts for them every time out from now on out.
Yeah, definitely. That's a crowded 6-7 slots there, and it's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out. I know we talked last week about the Bills and the Dolphins potentially matching up for that division on the last week of the year. I think this whole conference is going to, maybe this Colts Raiders game will settle one thing here, but this conference and its seeding is going to come down to the wire for sure.
Well, I think you're going to have seeding battles for the NFC West.
Yeah.
And that's it. And potentially the NFC West, you're going to have seeding. But the AFC North, the AFC East, the AFC, probably not the AFC North. The AFC East and the AFC South are both going to be questions. Mm-hmm. And you could theoretically say the AFC East, the North, theoretically. If the Steelers lose a couple more games, it's possible. But
is there a Browns Steelers matchup left? Or have they
there is. I believe there is.
Possible.
I believe it's next weekend. Not this week. Yeah, it's next week. It's on the 3rd of January.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that actually may be the last game of the season for them. Those two teams. It is. It's the last game of the season for those two teams. So you could theoretically, the Steelers' schedule. Let's see here. Steelers' schedule has got the Bengals this week. The Bills this week, losable game. The Bengals next week, not very losable. The Colts is a losable game. So if the Browns win out and the Steelers lose except for the Bengals, you're coming down to the Browns-Steelers game being relatively the decider. I think relatively the decider there, because the Browns are 9-3. If they win their 2, they'll be 11-3 or 12-3. Yeah, they'll be 12-3. And the Steelers, if they win 1 and lose 2, they'll be 12-3. So theoretically, the AFC North, the AFC East, and the AFC South could all be decided on the last week.
Yeah. It's shaping up to be a wild final month.
And the Titans have the Green Bay Packers and the Lions left. And then the Jaguars and Texans. Colts have Jaguars and Texans, but they have Steelers and Raiders. So you want to compare, Steelers to the Green Bay Packers and the Raiders to the Lions. They won both those. the Colts won both those games.
Right.
So, it's going to come down to the wire for those three divisions in the AFC, and you don't have that in the NFC. You just don't.
No, not so much. Really, I mean, it's the West and then the unexciting NFC East,
Yeah.
which I don't want to wrap this up on another conspiracy theory, but boy, the Seahawks sure are looking like they want to face that NFC East winner.
Oh,
Just
yeah.
looking at the standings, um,
Yeah.
obviously the NFC East winner is going to get the number 4 seed, and if the Seahawks can basically just stay ahead of the Cardinals, the Vikings, and the Bucks, they're going to play that NFC East winner
So
in their first round.
the problem, though, that you face there is, okay, so Seahawks and Giants play week one of the playoffs, right? Let's just say
Yep.
the best seed of every game wins. Okay? Well, except for the Buccaneers, because I think the Buccaneers probably beat the Rams. So let's say Green Bay wins, so that's your 2 seed. Seahawks win, that's your 5 seed. Buccaneers win, so there's your 3 teams. And then the Saints obviously have gotten there. So Saints are playing the Bucks. Seahawks are playing the Packers. That ain't a good game for you guys. And even if it's not, Seahawks then play the Saints. It's kind of risky. If I'm them, I'm them, I want the 3 seed because I want my games to be at home. I don't want my games to be away. Because you're telling me that Russell Wilson with no run game has to go up to Green Bay or has to go down to going down to New Orleans would be fine.
I don't think there's really a home field advantage though this year. I think a lot of what I've read has been it's been basically playing at a neutral site.
I'm not talking about home field advantage though. I'm talking about where do you want to go and play. Now, I don't think you want to go and play in Green Bay in January with no run game.
The Seahawks, their run game is getting healthy though. So that could be a positive for them coming up. I guess that's a good point, but then you flip it the other way. Like even if the Seahawks get the 2 seed, which I guess is still possible, then it pushes someone like Green Bay to the 5, and then Green Bay beats the NFC East winner, and then it's just Green Bay and the Seahawks again.
I think being in Seattle is better.
Switched.
I think being in Seattle is better. Your team doesn't have to travel. It's not going to be nearly as cold in Seattle as it's going to be in Green Bay in January.
I'm just not putting that much stock into location this year, even if it is weather dependent like that. I think the Seahawks do fine. I'll say they'll do fine if they have a run game and healthy Chris Carson by then. That's the question mark.
Yeah.
I just don't think going to New Orleans or Green Bay is like it normally is.
New Orleans would be fine because you're inside a dome. That's why I don't think it really matters much if the Seahawks get the number 1 seed. They won't, more than likely. But I don't want my team going to Green Bay. Period. I just that's me. I don't want them anywhere near Green Bay in January. If it's me, especially if I don't have a run game. And the Seahawks run game is your number 1 runner is Chris Carson with 429 yards. And your second best runner is Russell Wilson for 424. Carlos Hyde has 227. DJ Dallas has 101. Travis Homer 88. In total, you've got 1,400 yards rushing on 298 attempts. With Chris Carson coming back healthy, how many rushes are they going to give him right off the bat? And can he stay healthy? Because I think this is his 3rd season now that he's had injury issues.
Yeah. Well, they're already working him back in. I think they gave him limited carries last week. I see bigger issues with the Seahawks than going to Green Bay. I think their run game and taking some load off Russell with the offensive line is much more of a concern
Hmm.
than having to go to New Orleans or
Well, and their
Green Bay
defense.
in an empty stadium. Yeah, and their defense is improving, but yeah, they've flipped. It's almost like their offense, specifically their line, is now the concern. Um,
Yeah.
so they've got some things to sort out for sure.
All right. Who you got tonight? L.A. or New England?
Uh, I'm going with LA, but the huge win that New England had, I think this game will be closer than maybe the records would indicate.
What's your one game you're other than the Seahawks? Which I don't even think hopefully you don't have to watch the Seahawks game this week because they're playing the
Yes,
Jets.
yeah.
But
Hopefully not.
what's the one game you're watching this week, and who wins?
Let me do a quick scroll through here. I mean, Colts Raiders, that's gonna be a big one, really, like you mentioned.
Okay, who's winning?
But I actually just I scrolled all the way down to the bottom to see the Sunday night game, Steelers Bills. As I mentioned earlier in this episode, I think the Bills are a threat to the Steelers in that conference.
Okay.
So, but I'll go with. I think the Colts pull that one out. I think they're just a little better team, and then I think the Bills actually knock the Steelers off for Sunday night.
The two I'm watching, other than the Colts game, I think the Colts beat I predicted them to go 12-4. I think the Colts will win out the rest of the season. I'm sticking by that. I'm watching the Tampa Bay Minnesota game at 1:00. If it's on, I'm watching it. I think that's going to be a really good game, and there's some playoff seating. My Minnesota's 7th and Tampa Bay is 6th. So there's some playoff seedings going there. And I want to see Tom Brady is apparently calling all the plays on offense now from the quarterback position. So he has full control. So I'm interested to see what kind of play call he makes. And then the other one is that Monday night one, Cleveland versus Baltimore. Will Lamar Jackson take that next step? Or will Cleveland take him down and stop them? They had a great win against the Cowboys Monday, and we'll see kind of where they come down with that one. But that's kind of those are my two. I think the Browns. I think the Browns lose that game. I think the Ravens will come out, and I think they'll be a little bit more than the Browns can handle. And Baker's due for a mistake and for a drop. Personally, I think he's due for a mess up. So,
yeah, that's fair.
All righty. Well, do you think that's what we got for the weekend or for the week?
Yeah, that was good. I think we covered a lot. Had a lot of good things we're watching out for. Some stuff to keep our eyes on. See how this last month of the NFL plays out.
Absolutely. So, with that being said, guys, we are going to call the episode here. As far as Christmas goes, Zach is out of town, so more than likely there will not be. When are you leaving, Zach?
Let's see. I'm gone. I will miss the New Year's Eve.
To the 31st.
Yeah, and then I guess depending what we're doing, maybe we just bump up our Christmas Eve one to Tuesday that week.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. That's probably what we'll do. Okay, so December 31st, we may miss an episode, not miss an episode. I'll come up with something hopefully that I can kind of do. We won't have Zach, but maybe we can get someone else on, and we can maybe talk about some other things, maybe some soccer or something like that. I'll see what I can do to get a guest host with me. But with that being said, next week we are still go. We'll be talking about the NFL, and I think we can probably be talking a little bit about college championship games, Zach. So if you could take a look at kind of some of those matchups and what you think from that standpoint. I know we don't neither one of us really follows much college football, but I think that could be an interesting topic as we get closer to the playoffs, college playoffs, stuff like that. So with that being said, guys, I'm going to sign off here. Thank you so much for being here and spending some time with us. If you missed any of the episode, go check it out on YouTube. It should be up Sunday morning at the latest, and potentially earlier than that. Just depends on when I can get it edited and uploaded. So that being said, we're going to go ahead and call it here. I'll pass it off to Zach. But for me, we'll see you next time. Go ahead, Zach.
Yeah. We'll see you guys next time. Just let us know, YouTube comments. We'll be starting to touch on some new stuff here. Again, just want to hear from you guys and what you want to hear, what you want to see. NBA starting up. Got some college football, college basketball. NFL will be wrapping up. So let us know.
Yep. All right. Thanks, guys.